This video will do a brief demonstration of how to use the App.Config file in a Windows Form application. This is being done using Visual Studio 2008. First, I'm going to go ahead and open up a new project. We'll go ahead and name this project App.Config Video. Okay, so we have our basic Windows form here in a standard project. We'll go ahead and add some controls to the form. We'll give it a close button, a data grid view, as well as an image box. So we have the controls on the forms now. I'll go ahead and just give it some standard naming here so we can address these later in the demonstration. Also, I'm going to go ahead and bind the data grid view to a standard Northwinds database from the sample files. And for the purpose of this, we'll just go ahead and pick a couple of columns out of the employee database. At this point, we're ready to go ahead and add the app.config to the project. We just tell it to go ahead and add a new item, go under the General tab, and then pick the application configuration file. Okay, the first thing I want to make a notice of, so we went through and added the database to use for the data grid view. When we did that, it automatically created a portion of the app.config called connection settings. And as I scroll across here, you'll be able to see that there is a path statement in there for where the data source is. So that's something that's already given to you out of the box. Now we want to go ahead and add a few more settings in here to be able to use for various different pieces of the demonstration. And the way we do this is go ahead and create another node in the XML file called app settings. And then for each setting that we want to use, we go ahead and add a key for it. We'll go ahead and give that key a name. And then once the key has a name, go ahead and assign it the value. For now, we're going to just leave this as not set. And then we'll continue on adding the other keys that we'll be using for the demonstration. So in total, we now have 3 of the app settings values. One we'll use for a company name, one for a path to an image file, and then the last one we'll bring that in as a Boolean value on whether or not we're going to show the close button. From here, we're going to go ahead and create another class. We'll call it the App.Config Reader. That will actually bring the values in from the App.Config file and allow us to use them within the project. So we'll go ahead and just add a new class. So we'll call this class App.Config Reader and then add this to the project. And then the first thing we're going to need in here is a settings reader. This will allow us to read the settings in from the XML file. This is something that is provided to you out of the box with Visual Studio. One thing to note is that this class does not provide you the ability to write back to the App.Config, as that's not intended to be an out-of-the-box feature with VB.NET. Okay, so now we have our new app settings reader. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and declare any of the variables that we will be setting from the app.config file. So the format of putting this in there, declare the variable, we're going to set it as the app settings reader, get value. Here you put the name of the child node and then specify the type of data you're going to be bringing it in as. By default, everything in the app.config is stored as a string. Obviously we can convert that over to whatever type of value we're going to look for. In the demonstration, I don't do any type of error handling, So realize if you're going to be bringing something in as a true-false boolean, then you need to make sure that you put some kind of error handling if the app config did not have such a value in it. I'll go ahead and add the other couple of values that we're going to need here. So now we have the values for company name, that'll be a string, the logo image, which will be the path to the image file, which is also a string, and then a boolean value for whether or not we're going to display the close button on the screen. Next, we want to go ahead and create methods for each of these to be able to get those values. So here we have one method for each of the properties that we are seeing here that will go ahead and return the value that we've read in from the app.config file. So next we'll go over the code for the Windows form that we're using, and then we'll go ahead and actually use some of these values. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just put some entries in on the form load event. That will do a couple of things. First, I want to set the text of the Windows form to equal the company name. We'll set the picture box path to equal the image file from the app.config, and then we'll go from there. And also adding in the boolean for whether or not we're going to show that close button. Okay, so now we have the three values read in, setting the text to the company name. Didn't mean to do that. Setting the logo image location to the path that we're going to bring in there, and then the close .visible boolean to the boolean that we're reading in as well. Go ahead and get rid of this here. We don't need that. The only thing left to do on this form here is we're going to go ahead and add in the close option for the close button. Okay, so we have those basic settings in there. So now we'll go ahead and we'll build the project. Okay, so now we're in the release directory of the project after doing the standard build. I went ahead and added in a couple of files for use in this demonstration. So we have two logos to use, two databases to use. Next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and edit the app.config, which once you build it, it becomes the application's name.exe and then the config extension. So for this purpose, I'm going to open this up just using Notepad to show you that you can. Also, you could use Visual Studio. If you just was to open it by default, it would open there, and you'll be able to use that formatted version instead. So for our first demonstration, we're just going to go ahead and use the standard Northwind. That's what we set when we used the designer. And if we look down here, here's the values that we had set in. So we'll go ahead and give it a company name. We'll specify the name of the logo image, and we'll leave that we're going to show the close button as true. Okay, so we have some settings in there for that now. Let's go ahead and save this and leave it open so we can edit it a little bit later. Then we can go ahead and run the executable. So here we go. Notice that the text up here is a company name that we added in there. The logos here obviously is not very well formatted, but that's something that we would work more with in a real application. And then we just have a list of the employees that came out of that version of the database. And the close button is accessible to us. So I'll go ahead and close this now, and then we'll make some changes in the config file here. I put all these files in the same directory just for the ease of this demonstration. If I was to go ahead and place them elsewhere, we just have to quantify those directories. So I'm going to go ahead and change this that we're going to use database number 2. We'll come down here and we'll change this to a different cruise agency. Change this logo to number 2. And then we'll go ahead and we'll set this boolean to false. And save that file. From there again, we'll go ahead and run the executable. And now notice, without having to do any recompiling or anything like that, we went ahead and changed the image here, the text on the form, as well as the database. You can see that the employee names have changed from the standard demonstration to some of our singers out there. And the close button is now not visible. So that gives a quick demonstration. By including these config files in your project, you can make simple changes, such as a company name or a version of the database. Maybe you could have something that would have a test dev prod database, and you could change that in the config file. And these are settings that you could either train somebody or yourself could change and just provide them the new config file without actually having to recompile your code. these are not the full extent of what the demonstration could do or what these settings could be used for, just like any other code. They extend your imagination. So I hope this demonstration was somewhat useful to you and get you started using the App.Config, and good luck.